All right, so I'm back with another video, and this is gonna be the one where I talk about the AI thing. So I have previously made a video about it in the past, but of course my old phone messed up and all of that, so I gotta remake it. But I think most of my talking points, for the most part, is gonna stay the same, but it's gonna have some extra added bits to it, because after really just thinking about it a whole lot more and just seeing more stuff, news coming out with it, I think that there is more I want to get into regarding that. So to begin, I didn't hear about this whole AI thing until maybe mid 2022, because I don't know if that's when it first started coming out, but all I know is I just started hearing about this technology where you can put, let's say, a prompt into a database, and it just turns out pictures for you, like different kinds of artwork and all of that. So it was still in the infancy stage. I saw a lot of the early stuff. It looked crude as heck, really ugly, really just, it wasn't really very polished. But of course, as something new comes out, it eventually becomes a trend. It starts becoming a fad. So now a whole lot more people who maybe wasn't interested in like arts and crafts or drawing and all of that stuff, like now they're picking up this machine and they're like, yeah, I can just put this thing into a prompt and out pops a picture. And I'm sure, as some of y'all already know, a lot of controversy started coming up from that, where it was this problem where this technology, this machinery, it was feeding different kinds of information from renowned artists or popular or internet artists into this database, and it was like just using their ideas to auto-generate a picture based on their prompt. I'm sorry, not prompt, but based on their style. So I know Sam does art. I know it was some drama surrounding that, where Midjourney, at least I think it was Midjourney, just this Midjourney AI was swiping his aesthetic style and just putting it into this machine, into this database, and it was turning out pictures that looked just like Sam does art, just like the pictures he would draw. And of course, it's a lot of debate about the ethics surrounding that, like whether is it right for or ethical for people to just swipe your aesthetic, artistic style into this database and then turn out pictures related to your style and not credit you for it, for example. And that's just been one of the concerns. And that particularly, I want to focus on that for a while, because the last time I was like, it's bullshit, like it's real, like I heavily disagreed, and I was just responding out of emotion. But now that I think about it, it's a whole lot more this than meets the eye, I think, because I didn't know this at first, but apparently you cannot copyright an artistic style. Supposedly, that's what I heard, is that copyright styles, like they're not protected under copyright laws, Now, I'm not a guru at this. I'm not heavily, knowledgeable about the legal inquiries surrounding this, but I can add some 2 cents that can maybe broaden just how we look at this. So for the people who are in favor of like this AI technology, their arguments are commonly that, what they do with AI, like, just making AI prompts, let's say within the style of Hayao Miyazaki or Sam Dazard or freaking Tosuka Dimizu. I know she's one of my favorite illustrators, but they compare doing prompts of these artists to how other artists, like, real fine artists, will take inspiration from, let's say, another artist or art style. And I can't give any examples of it right now, just like right off the top of my head, but there is something that I want to show y'all, and I'm gonna put the image up on the screen. I'm gonna leave it there probably for about maybe 30 to 50 seconds. I'm gonna put 2 images up on the screen, and I'm gonna ask y'all to spot out whatever it is about these 2 pictures that maybe catches your eye, or that you can say is maybe more unique than the other, or just like anything at all. And then I'm gonna get back to you with this commentary. Okay, so one of the things you may notice is that how both of those 2 images, they have, like, you may assume that because of the way it looks, because of the way the style is, that it was done by the same artist. But in actuality, these were 2 different illustrators, right? But they look similar. Like, if you really look at the visual narrative of it, the characters look similar. The aesthetic, like the way that they present visual props, like, it all looks the same. All the way down to the character again. So, like, yeah, any reasonable person would assume that, yes, this is by the same illustrator, but it's actually by 2 different illustrators, and that's a lot of what I see, like, online, especially on websites like Pixiv and ArtStation, is that there will be artists who almost verbatim will use the same visual narrative, you know, to the point to where it's damn near not, it's indistinguishable from one another. And these are actual artists, you know, they're not AI, they're not using AI, their prompts. We're talking about actual artists right here. So, a lot of people who are against like this AI thing, their arguments would be that, well, it's not right for, you know, our aesthetic styles to be just swiped through this bot and not giving credit and just basically having your work stolen is what they call it. But it's like, if you really think about it, that's no different than from the example that I just provided. So now it gets into a real shaky area of what can be considered plagiarism, right? How far can you actually use the same ideas or the same aesthetic and take inspiration from, let's say, another artist and it still be considered an independent idea, you know? And unfortunately, I don't have the answer. I can't give you a right out answer for that, but I can maybe give instances that can help you all to determine that for yourselves. And so I'm gonna use another idea after I cross this street here. But yeah, I'm gonna use another idea. So, of course, y'all know I like to watch manga and read anime, right? Now, one of my most favorite anime is The Promised Neverland. And so I remember when I first read that and being gripped, I don't know if that's a fucking word, but being gripped by the story and the narrative of what was being shown. And so I read that, you know, of course, unfortunately, that series has become a meme of kind of going downhill after a certain point. But it does have elements of high quality to it. So I would often engage in commentary about, you know, people's opinions about it, about, like, you know, the later chapters, what went wrong, what could have made it better. And it was this one comment down below that just kept spamming the same thing again, like, oh, well, hey, if you like The Promised Neverland, you should try Shadow House. Hey, try reading Shadow House. Shadow House is just like The Promised Neverland. Shadow House, hey, have you tried to read Shadow House yet? I'm like, what? Like, okay, can you stop spamming the same damn thing? But I'm like, what I was thinking is, okay, so this dude keeps saying to read Shadow House, so all right, I'm gonna go pull up this manga, I'm gonna read this shit, and I'm gonna see what home dude's talking about, right? So I go, and I started reading Shadow House, and at first, I'm like, yeah, it's real interesting, but I wasn't seeing the similarities that this guy was talking about at first, you know. But I would say towards like the first half where things really hit the fan, is when I did start seeing a noticeable similarity between what Shadow House did with their story and what The Promised Neverland was doing with their story. And so let me list out the similarities. So just like The Promised Neverland, Shadow House revolves around a story of mystery, you know. So it's like the characters, the main protagonists, rather than relying on, like, let's say brute force or over the top power-ups, yeah, you know, all that good shit, they have to instead try to outsmart their way out of the situations, you know, the dilemmas that they're in. Right. Now, that in and of itself, like, yeah, I mean, a whole lot of series do that. But then, let me continue. Just like The Promised Neverland, Shadow House presents a narrative of where these inhabitants, you know, these kids basically, are essentially being held captive. They're being held captive in this private quarters that's made to look like a house, you know, duh. And they're being closed off from the world around them, where things are strategically set up to discourage any form of escape or rebellion. Just like The Promised Neverland, you know. And also, like The Promised Neverland, the main character of Shadow House has to recruit people to come up with an elaborate plan to escape the dilemma that they're in. You know, so Shadow House, like later on, it really draws a lot of parallels between The Promised Neverland. You know, just even some of the dialogue is the same, where, like, you know, maybe how some of the side characters may disagree with the plan of the main character. Like, you know, let's say Kate, for instance, she wants to help everyone in, you know, like in the mansion escape out of that, you know, just escape out of the fucked up shit that they're being made to go through, you know, that these higher powers is subjecting them through. And other characters is like disagreeing with that, and it's like, nah, man, like, you know, no, that's too risky. We just gotta escape by ourselves. Sounds familiar. Just like what happened, some of the conversations that Emma was having with Norman or Ray within The Promised Neverland about their escape plan. So you get the picture, right? Like, and so I see what this guy was talking about when he said, like, you know, Shadow House is in some ways similar, like really similar to The Promised Neverland, you know. But there are also a lot of things that make it different. Right, so while Shadow House takes a lot of props and, you know, a lot of build up from The Promised Neverland, there is stuff that makes it different though. But it's like, for instance, the way the main characters are portrayed. So while you have, okay, let me just take Emma from The Promised Neverland, for instance. So she is basically the glue that holds everything together, because Norman and Ray, they're more the nihilistic type. They're more the realist. They're not the type who will want to go through with a plan unless they're sure that it's 100% that it's gonna work. And Emma is like, she's kind of a genius too, but she's more rooted in idealism and just kind of going against the odds and against the calculations. So she's more of the person who's gonna encourage the whole party when they're having doubts about their direction, But one of the things that makes her stand out is that she never comes across as really incompetent or just maybe too dense for her own good. Like, she always has a good understanding of these odds, but she just chooses to, go against the grain and to try to make the impossible possible, if that makes sense. Compared to Emilico in Shadow House. Now, she is kind of the same as Emma. She has some of the same bubbly or, personality, the same lightheartedness, I guess you can say. But she's more klutzy. She's more dense. She really isn't as aware to her surroundings at first. So she makes a lot of mistakes and just kind of blunders a lot of the time. Now, she gets better later in the series, but she's not as competent as, let's say, Emma is. And then you have Kate again. Now, Kate is more of... Now, she's also a mix between Emma, but she's also kind of has a bit of Norman and Ray in her, where she's like, kind of wants to go against the grain, but like, she's real strategic in whatever she does. She's more like, she's a planner. But what sets her apart from, let's say, Norman or Ray is she's more emotional. She gets emotional within the story at times, to the point to where she unknowingly sabotages herself. And so and that's where Emilico comes in, because Emilico, also kind of like Emma, she acts as kind of that glue that keeps everything together. She's more able to just make people open up. The only thing is, she starts off as just kind of more ditzy or klutzy or whatnot. So there we go. Some of the similarities and differences between these two manga. And so my point in getting into all of that is to go back to what I was talking about before. How far can you go within pulling inspiration from a source material, whether knowingly or unknowingly, because you've had them, I know y'all have heard them stories where, oh, this person came out with this idea and copied off of mine, so I'm gonna sue him. And then the person who came up with that idea didn't even know it was in direct comparison to the other person's. So it's just this kind of mix up that takes place. But back to the question is, when is it can you take inspiration from something, from an idea or a source material, and you still be able to have it considered as your own idea, you know, because there is obviously a certain line that needs to be drawn so things aren't just straight out plagiarism. And y'all can answer that in the comment section, because I'm not going to even try to act like I fucking know, you know, because I don't. But I do think this is an interesting question to ask. And this is where we go back to the whole AI situation. Because with what these AI bros is talking about, how they're inputting like data from other artists into this machine or this prompt and making works or, you know, artworks based off of these aforementioned artists, that's essentially the same as the two illustrations that I showed. You know, that's essentially the same as the Shadow House and the Promised Neverland example. So they do have a point. You know, I will say that they do have a point. Now, I'm not saying that I like it. You know, if I'm to be honest, I fucking despise AI art. I think it's the worst shit to happen to this generation. And I'm gonna get into that now. And I think this is one of the more important things to consider with this AI technology is the entire drama and the nonstop arguing and surrounding it, where people who are in favor of AI and people who are against it is going at each other's throats. Now, I'm gonna say this about the AI bros, you know, a lot of these people are really disingenuous, you know, because a lot of them, like, while they have a point within what I was just talking about with the plagiarism and all of that, a lot of them really like to hide behind this facade of, oh, it's just a machine that we all just need to adapt to because that's what evolution's about. Like, that's, you know, we evolve as a species, and this technology is just another form of us evolving and becoming more advanced. But here's the thing behind that. As we evolve, quote unquote, with this technology, there has been a visible problem of people who, let's say, maybe went to school or spent a great deal of their lives practicing their craft to, let's say, pursue a profession in it. So maybe an animator or a concept artist who works at a gaming or a manga studio, like, you know, well, now there is a risk of these people being put out of jobs because this technology is making those fields obsolete. And these AI bros, they'll try to justify it and say, oh, well, that's good because that happened, like, that's what happened when digital art came out, or when the camera came out and it replaced, on plein air drawing, or like again, when digital art came out and it replaced, let's say, working at the easel or working on raw pencil and paper. And they try to compare AI taking over different artistic fields to that. But here is where the problem is. Digital art, Wacom, because that's what it's called, or that's the one that I know about. You got the Wacom tablet where you're able to draw on the screen as opposed to having to get pencil and paper and all of that. Here's the thing about that. That did not automatically, or at all, I'm going to say, that did not replace traditional artistry. Because, and I'm going to explain why. Because first, you still have to know how to draw. Okay? You still have to know the concepts of art, of anatomy, proper anatomy, of distance, of 1 point, 2 point, 3 point, 4 point perspective, and so on and so forth. You still have to know the concepts of color theory, and grayscale, and, just different kinds of color saturations. You still have to know all of that. You still have to learn all of that to be a proficient artist, digital artist. All of that didn't just up and change because Wacom came out with a tablet where you can draw it on the screen. And I'm gonna say this too. While drawing on a digital tablet may be more convenient in some ways, it's also a bit more expensive for people who may not have the money to afford it. So for people like me who can afford to, let's say, buy maybe $1,000 Wacom tablet, pencil, paper, and a drawing board, those are still widely accessible at art stores, and they don't, having to work on those kinds of materials don't make you any less of an artist as if you're working on a Wacom tablet. And I will say that digital artistry as a whole even complements traditional artistry, because there are artists who work traditionally, like with pens, paint, even just pencil, who are able to make their work look like it was created by a digital artist. And to name a few, well, what's his name? Well, Vladimir Kush, I believe he's one. Michael Wayland, who is a fantasy artist. And within the same vein of him, Frank Frazetta. Yeah, so Frank Frazetta, he's another one. Who else? And I think those are the ones who I can just think of right now. And on the side of digital artistry, you have artists like Wadaboku. I know the name sounds fucking stupid. I don't know why they come up with these kinds of names, but What a Boku is one. Wallop. And Sandara. Yeah, so if you were to compare those artists who I just listed with digital, any kind of digital art on, let's say, ArtStation, like, you probably wouldn't spot a lot of differences between them. Maybe some noticeable differences here and there, but not so much. Because these traditional artists like, Michael Whaling, Frank Frazetta, Vladimir Kush, they were able to hone their skills to the point to where they were able to use paint to replicate that digital artistry feeling. And so in a way, digital art complements traditional art, because here you have a person who is able to do all of this on pencil and paper. So the whole argument that digital art somehow kind of made traditional art obsolete, it's not a convincing argument, I will say, in my opinion, And so going back to the issue of jobs being replaced by AI technology, I'm going to ask another question that no one seems to be asking. First and foremost, why should someone have to go back to school? Because that's what a lot of these AI bros is saying. Oh, well, that's just evolution, yo. I guess it's time for you to find something else. Why? Okay. Why should someone have to go back to school, spend more money that they probably don't even have, and potentially go into more debt to try to pursue another career because some fucking corporation came up with this oh so innovative technology and put the careers that they have been working, these artists have been working to acquire, out of commission? That doesn't sound like this. That doesn't sit well with me. It don't make sense to just tell someone that, pursue what it is you're passionate about, but then as soon as some company makes your shit obsolete, they make your skill obsolete, now it's up to you to try to go back to school or find something else or find another means of employment. That's bullshit. Okay? That is fucking bullshit. And I don't buy that argument one bit. Another thing is that I'm sick of the whole mindset that just because something comes out within our society, just because we have a new technological innovation, that it's automatically considered an evolutionary product for society as a whole. Because if that's the case, then shouldn't this AI stuff be making our jobs as citizens a lot easier in general? Shouldn't our lives be getting more easier? Shouldn't we be able to do less work and still live comfortably? No, that's not what you're hearing about. If you will go online right now, that's not what you're going to hear about. What you're going to hear about is what I was just talking about, that these companies that come out with this technology, it takes over an industry, it takes over a job field, and it makes the skills that people had acquired in order to work in these fields obsolete. So I'm thinking, if this stuff was really about evolution, you know, just evolving our society for the better, why the fuck are people losing jobs behind this? Why the hell are people being told, being put out of work, being put out of means to make money behind the creation of this technology? That's a great thing to think about, isn't it? Huh? It is to me. And so here is what this evolution should be looking like. Here is what this looks like to me with evolution. So with technological evolution, my idea of what that is, let's say, okay, yes, we have all this AI technology coming out and it's replacing jobs, but it's also opening up an avenue for our society, entire societal structure to change. So that means because AI technology is taking over everything, then that means people get to work less and they get to spend more time at home, maybe pursuing their own endeavors in their private time. Maybe things become a lot easier to where now we don't have to pay as much on stuff or try to, like, you know, struggle to afford things, like housing or food and all of that, because now all of that stress is being lightened by this technology that's making all the manual labors and all the high quality jobs more obsolete for people. So now that leaves more room for people to, let's say, learn how to start a garden or, learn proper survival skills to where they can survive off the land. Or maybe the government, something gets set up to where the government or whoever just kind of supplements just the old way of society for maybe a new, simpler way. So, like, let's say where people are just, hypothetically speaking, given proper accommodations of housing or living. So that means you don't got to go to fucking work as much or at all and work your ass off to the bone to barely afford rent. That's what evolution looks like to me. Okay, if all this technological advancement of AI and all of that, if it's truly a societal evolution, then our lives as a whole should be getting easier. But that's not what's happening. Instead, prices are constantly going up. Things are more expensive than what they've ever been. Housing is more expensive. Food is more expensive. People are still having to work 2, now even I'm hearing 3 jobs just to fucking afford rent. But yet, here comes this grand evolutionary technology that's putting more people in higher positions or of career advancements out of a fucking job, out of work, all while they're being told to go back to the drawing board. How the fuck is that evolution? How the fuck is that making our society better? It isn't. It isn't. And I am sick and tired of these people who defend this technology getting all up in the comment sections and all up on these videos. Not my videos, because, just speaking in general, where this kind of debate takes place. I'm sick of these type of people getting all up on these kinds of forums and stuff and defending this technology, all while they gaslight the other person, and that somehow this is all their responsibility because they're not able to adapt to the changing culture or to the changing technological advancements. You know, I'm sick of that fucking excuse. And the whole thing, again, like, it's disingenuous. And I'm gonna tell you why it's disingenuous. Because these same people who make this argument are the same people who will get up on these comment sections and start talking shit, like, about how these artists or these illustrators or animators, how they're losing their jobs to AI. I mean, they are ecstatic about it. They're not ecstatic about this so technological machinery that they claim is supposed to make society better. They're ecstatic about the reality that these same people are losing their fucking jobs to this stuff, and they're getting on here or like on the internet just celebrating that. Talking like they're happy that people are losing their jobs and their years of work and commitment to this stuff, to this fucking technology. Oh, but it's about societal advancement. This is societal advancement. That's what they say. This is necessary for societal advancement. People losing their jobs and not being able to pay their bills and having years of schooling or maybe even self-discipline, self-practice go to waste, right? Because a lot of artists are self-taught these days. But these AI supporters are fine with all of that going to waste and putting people who've worked their whole lives to get into these dream jobs in a financial bind, at a financial disadvantage, because that's somehow necessary for us as a species to advance technologically. Does that make sense to any of y'all? No, it don't. Not to me. It doesn't make sense to me. And so that's where I fucking have a problem with this AI technology. It's just how these supporters of it will use it as an excuse and as a way to just gaslight the other party that somehow their own disadvantages is their fault because they have an issue with their financial stability being uprooted from them by greedy corporations who just want a quick buck, from using this technology. And so that's basically what I wanted to get into. I'm going to say something else before I cut it off. I'm going to say something else because I honestly think it goes deeper than this. I honestly think that it's a bit of a conspiracy behind this, why this is happening. Because how the fuck are we coming out with all this stuff and our lives are just getting harder? Nothing has become easier in our lives. And again, stuff is just getting more expensive, all while our chance of job opportunities are getting less and less, And so I know a lot of people make fun of Alex Jones, but I'm inclined to believe some of what he was saying back in the day when he was saying that our government is trying to kind of, like, you know, low-key crash our society in order to usher in this one world government, right? I've heard all the conspiracies about the FEMA camps and about, like, you know, how the things are gonna get so bad, how we're gonna supposedly go into another Great Depression that's gonna screw everything up and cause martial law. It sounds crazy, but considering everything that I've just said, does it really sound that far-fetched? And y'all can answer that below in the comment section. But that goes back to what I was saying, that just because something new comes out, just because some new technology or some new gadget comes out, that doesn't mean that it's going to just benefit society as a whole. And I think a whole lot of people have that misconception that that's what's going to happen because it's something new and slick. And that's just not the case, you know. But I think this is only part one. I think I'm going to make a part two. And hopefully I was able to voice some of the things I wanted to say about this a lot clearer. I know y'all didn't hear my last video about it, but, you know, I really am trying to be more calmer and more reasonable about it this time around. So hopefully what I said made sense, and, you know, and y'all can tell me what y'all think in the comment section. And so, yeah, I'll get back to y'all with another one real soon.